Hello everybody, my name is Lynn Spinella and this is my podcast People Matter, where we chat to people who can teach and inspire us by sharing their stories to help us be better versions of ourselves through love, war and coronavirus. So a lot of us have had change over the last few months, so I thought there was no better time than to bring someone on who's had multiple change in his life and is particularly good at it, especially when it comes to career. So Julian Mather has seen life through a lot of lenses. He has seen life through a telescopic sight as an army sniper, through a TV camera lens as a videographer for ABC, BBC and National Geographic, through smoke and mirrors as a professional magician. He's changed a lot. He's gone from being a public servant to an entrepreneur, from being behind the camera to in front of it, from being a stutterer to a professional speaker. And today, Julian is what do you call yourself, Julian? A video phone evangelist. Smartphone video evangelist, a speaker, a writer, and chief agitator for the Business Video Rebellion. I know that we're in for a treat today. Welcome to the program, Julian Mather.
Oh, thanks for inviting me, Lynn. I'm really happy to be here.
And it's a pleasure to have you. All that time behind, you became an army sniper, as we mentioned in the beginning. All that time behind the scope, you were seeing life. You were creating your own films in your head, I'm guessing.
Yeah, well, that was what, I got into the army. I didn't know what, I had no particular plan, but to just not be in Australia. But when I went in there, I sold myself on my strengths of wanting to be a photographer. And when I got in there, they said, oh, they didn't tell you that in the recruiting office, did they? We don't really need photographers. We need people in the infantry.
Oh,
so
good.
I got put in the infantry and I was like, oh, this is not what I thought. Anyway, I wasn't that happy in there. I wasn't happy being told to do a lot of things by people I didn't respect that much. So I started to look around within the organization I was in. And this is one of the key things that I've learned. There is opportunity everywhere if you are willing to look for it. Mm-hmm. So I started to look at, right, I'm not happy being told by a whole lot of people, a whole lot of chain of command. How can I get out of that? And I looked around, and being a sniper was, you got independence. You were tasked by a battalion commander. And I went, right, that's what I want to do. So I then had to learn, what do I need to learn to become an army sniper? Because honestly, I basically never picked up a rifle before I joined the army.
Sure.
I was not a crack shot. So I applied myself to learning what you needed to do to become a sniper. I got on the sniper course. It was very hard, but I applied myself, and you don't put in 8 hours a day, you put in 16 hours a day, because there are plenty of other people out there who were less qualified or equally ill qualified as me, who would have got through based on maybe natural talents. I didn't have that natural talent. I needed to put in extra time. And this is one of the key things I've learned out of all the people I've met, is that extraordinary people are ordinary people who do extra. It is so key. I've seen it over and over and over again. And you know, the great thing about that, when I realized that was almost like, that was so liberating to me. And here's why. Because to be extraordinary, you have to be ordinary to begin with. And Your Honor, Exhibit A, the world's most ordinary person. I don't have any particular talent. I'm just willing to apply myself a heck of a lot more than a lot of other people are. And this is key. And I started to notice this with so many other people. So when I was a documentary cameraman, we would film with people, and I'm talking, they could be sports stars, they could be politicians, they could be academics, they could be regular, people who've done well in whatever area. And there was a commonality. We would go, could we come and film you in the morning? And I go, well, listen, you got to get up early, because Monday morning I go for a run at 5 o'clock. Tuesday morning I take the kids down to this. Wednesday morning, okay, can we do it after work? Well, after work I've got a P&C meeting. Then I've got this, I've got some course I'm doing.
Yes.
Extraordinary people are ordinary people who do extra.
Okay, so I'm thinking, when I'm listening to you, you've met so many people over the years. I mean, you were a videographer, cameraman for 25 years?
Yeah, yeah,
Is
for
that
two and a
right?
half
Okay.
decades.
So, I mean, my first introduction to photojournalism was when I read One Crowded Hour, the biography of Neil Davis,
Yeah.
way back. And I thought being behind the camera in another country must surely be one of the most thrilling and enlightening jobs that you could have. And you must have just learnt and seen so much. You're talking about ordinary people. What else did you learn about human nature by being behind the lens?
That we are way more similar than we are dissimilar. That we're all we want to be loved,
Mm-hmm.
and we want respect. And I mean, there's many other things, but those two things. And once you understand that about it, once you understand that about other people, it helps you then with your relationships with other
Yeah,
people, because it
sure.
helps you empathize with other people. Because if you just stop, when you meet someone or you're working with someone and their behavior, like it's rubbing you up the wrong way, quite often we react rather than respond
Yeah.
to how people, and I used to all the time. I mean, I had my habits, my built-in ways. I would react, just fly off the handle. You knucklehead, whatever. And then I learned to get, when I realized that they're just like me, they've got all those worries and fears and anxieties that I do. How's that playing out for them? So rather than doing that, I would change the way that I dealt with people
Mm-hmm.
and respond, give a little bit of breathing space, listen to them a little bit. And quite often those things just diffuse. And the power about that is that you build allies that
Yeah.
way. And if you want to change, and this has been, not a secret, but one of the tools that I have used to facilitate the change is
Yes.
building allies along the way.
Yep.
And some of those, I build a good relationship with them. Maybe in 5 years' time, I might call back on that and they might help me facilitate the change.
It's great advice, Julian. When we learn more about, it's one of my key things. If we learn more about each other and respect our differences, you don't have to love people. You don't have to have them over for a sleepover. But if you don't respect their differences, you have no chance of getting inside their head and no chance of connecting. It's great advice. Hey, listen, I know that you've had lots of changes in your life, and some of them seem obvious, but the one that really jumps out at me as not quite fitting is when you went from being at the top of your game as an ABC cameraman. You'd been there for a long time, you loved the job, and then you became a professional magician. How did that work?
So one of the great things, I had what I called the second best job in the world as a documentary cameraman. They would literally put a plane ticket in one hand, money in the other, kick me out the door, say, go tell people stories. And that was
Yeah.
great. I mean, I went to great places, but it was the people in front of the lens. And I kept seeing them because if you're in front of a TV lens, you're generally doing something. You're affecting some sort of change. You're there for a reason.
Yeah.
And I kept on seeing them, and their stories kept inspiring me and changing the way I was thinking. And I kept on thinking, what is it that I want to do out of life?
Mm.
So I got this idea. We worked on a documentary called Dynasties, about dynastical families in Australia. One of them was the Myer family, Myer stores. And one of the big things that they still do now is they have a big philanthropic side of their business.
Yeah.
And philanthropy in Australia is not a big thing. And most people don't understand it. And so I got involved, and I involved in the idea and followed what they were doing. And I went, I love this idea of philanthropy. And when I was doing interviews, say with someone in a bank, like a CEO of a bank, when we were setting up and it was a little bit of quiet time, I'd ask them, about their philanthropic ideas. And most people said two things. One, that they didn't really understand it because it's an American idea, and countries with strong social security nets don't have big philanthropic trusts.
That's interesting. Is that common around the world? Because the Americans are quite philanthropic, and we're probably not as, in the past, haven't been as generous as they have.
Because
is that fair?
Because our governments step in.
Yeah.
And it's a cultural difference. So I started to, and the other thing that they said is, I'm going to do it when I retire. And I went, hang on a minute, you're a person in authority at the moment. You've got your hands on the levers. You can affect change now. But it kept on falling on deaf ears. So that's when I thought, you can't teach an old dog new tricks with this, but can I teach the new pups a new way to take forward to the next generation, a new
I
idea
see.
about philanthropy? So
Okay.
at the top of my game, I took a program into schools
Yeah.
to teach philanthropy to school children. And I ran it past principals, I ran it
Yeah.
past parents, uh, I ran it past a lot of people, and they said, what a great idea. And I took this idea into schools to deafening silence. I said, hang on a minute. You said this is a great idea. They said, it's a really worthy idea. And I said, well, why won't you book me? And they said, you never asked us that. That was a completely different conversation we didn't have. You see, I came from I was in television. I worked for ABC a lot. I almost had a
Yes.
public service mindset.
Yeah.
I thought money grew on trees. I just thought you took an idea out there and it worked. I didn't have a commercial bone in my body. And so I learned my first lesson about business. Never open a restaurant unless you've got a starving crowd. So unless there's an actual want or a need for this,
Yes.
it's not going to go anywhere. But I didn't understand that. So my TV career sailed off into the distance while I failed commercially,
Yeah.
and I had no money, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So the hook that I used to get attention with the kids was magic. Because get this, when I was a cameraman, I always carried magic with me, because apparently people don't trust the media. And a good way to build rapport with a lot of people out there was to get their kids laughing and happy. So I'd do some magic tricks for them, do some magic tricks for the people. And I realized it was a really powerful tool. So that was the hook that I used when I went into schools. Hey kids, who wants to do some singing? Yeah. Who wants to do some dancing? Who wants to learn magic tricks? Yeah. It was great. It was very powerful. But it wasn't enough to, to earn me money. So when I had this program failed, I had to reinvent myself. And I went, what do I know? I know some magic skills. And then I started the process of being an independent small business, a practice as a magician. And I built that up over a number of years. That led me to having a YouTube channel, which did well. It had 30, in its time, this is probably 7-8 years ago, had 30 million views, and it's still up there. It's still got 140,000 subscribers.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and then that opened up a whole nother world for me.
Right. Okay. So you've gone for I've got a couple of questions for you. The first is, I'm going back to when you tested, you thought you tested this product, you went into schools, and then there was deafening silence. I'm thinking it would have been really easy to blame those people you tested it on, saying, why didn't you tell me this? But you didn't. You took it another way.
Yeah, and that's something I learned. I learned when I was an Army sniper. I learned quite a few things. Most of them not really applicable in general day-to-day life, but there were some core principles. And one of those was that every time we'd go out and they'd drop us off somewhere, because you'd either work alone or you'd work in pairs. But they'd drop you off, and they'd say, "Have you got your rifle? Check. Have you got your radio? Check. Have you got your mirror? Check." So we used to carry these little mirrors. They're just little polished steel mirrors, and you keep them in your pocket. Use them for shaving or washing, whatever. But they had another purpose, and it was probably the most important purpose, because they would always go. What we do is we'd use these mirrors in the morning. I'll just tell you a little thing we used to say to them. We'd go, "Mirror, mirror in the bush, who's the most handsome bloke in this bush? You are, Julian, without a doubt. Thank you, mirror. Roger, out." So that was our little bit of fun. But the most important thing, they said, if you've ever got any problems and you're out there by yourself, ask the man in the mirror, because he's the one who's going to sort them for you. And that's where I started to really learn about personal responsibility. And everything we do in life is a choice. Everything. If I decide to go limp and lie on the floor, and you cannot make me move. You can create consequences that might, make me think about moving, but you can't make me move unless I want to move. So everything we do is a choice. And once you understand that you can't, if you blame other people, you take your own power away, because by blaming other people, you're saying they're responsible. And if they're responsible, it means you're powerless. So by continually blaming people, you're it's like kryptonite to Superman, blaming people.
Yeah,
You're
I
taking
agree.
away that own power that you have. So learning to just go, all right, I made a choice.
Take
Wasn't the
ownership.
best choice,
Yeah.
but I'm going to go on and being happy and comfortable with failure. It's something
Yeah.
I've learned because I've done a lot of things, but I've also failed at
Yes.
a lot of things. I just don't promote those. I don't promote because I don't actually worry about them
Well, you learn
too
from them
much.
and you move on. I think that a lot of us maybe have a tendency to dwell on failure, and I think there's a fine line there. Understand that failure exists. It happened. What can I learn from it? Move on, but you don't need to dwell on it for years. No one else is. No one is thinking about it. Now, I'm
So,
thinking that people are listening, and due to COVID, or maybe reevaluating, a chance to reevaluate their lives, or maybe thinking, especially those in tourism, perhaps may not have a job to go back to. Lots of people may be thinking about starting their own business, doing something that you did as a magician, but get paralyzed by inaction. So what's your advice if someone's in that situation right now?
so what I do is anytime I think about change, I invoke what I call my own 1825 rule.
Mm-hmm.
And 1825 is essentially everything I do takes about 5 years. And most people think, oh, I'm going to change. I'll change in a couple of months or 6 months, a year. No, it's not. It just takes time to change effectively. So 1825 comes from there's 365 days a year,
Yeah.
and 5 years by 365 is 1825. And every day, all I have to do is make sure I do one thing, one small thing. It could
Excuse
be a
me.
phone call. It could be write something out. But if I do 1825 of those little steps, it's like osmosis. I can't tell you exactly how it happens.
Yeah.
All I know is I was stuck there, and 5 years later, I'm unstuck doing what I want to do. And by that time, I'm already thinking about my next change anyway. But
This is great advice, Julian, because a lot of people just expect success to happen overnight, and you are absolute proof that you work really hard at something and you can get there. It's never the most. I always think it's never the most talented people, or those that are born into money or whatever, that are the most successful in life. It's always people like you that work really hard and see the future and move into it. Now, I've been lucky enough to hear you speak in the past, and I remember that one of the main things you spoke about was last year was that the ability to unlearn and relearn is a critical 21st century skill. Is that still relevant?
oh, definitely. So that there's a saying. So Alvin Toffler, he was a futurist, a writer in America, and back in the 1970s, this guy had vision. He wrote this. He said, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write. It'll be those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn."
Mm.
And this is critical now because you've got to understand we are in the 100-year lifespan. So what that means is that any child born today has a more than 50% chance of living to 105 years old. So
Right.
we're all living longer. Now, I'm coming up to 60 years old. This is going to affect me. Health, everything. We are just living longer. If you're living longer, you're going to need to work longer. So I've got another 20 years that I'm going to be going at this, or 25 years. So
Yes.
if you're thinking that, oh, right, no, this doesn't affect me in whatever part of life, yes, it does. Now, the pace of technology is changing, and we all know that we go and learn something on an app or a program, and oh, now it's changed. We've got to learn something new. It's called the half-life of technology, and that's about 5 years. So whatever you learn currently, it's probably going to have to be relearned in 5 years' time. And all this is just getting shorter and shorter and expanding out into other areas of our life. So your ability to learn something and unlearn it and then relearn is critical. And that's a skill that we have to get, because here's the thing. We're all stuck in this old mindset of the three-phase life. That
Mm.
we go to school, we get a job, and we retire.
Mm-hmm.
That's gone. That is over. We are going to have multiple jobs, multiple possible opportunities, and your ability to be nimble and flexible with this, regardless of how old you get, is
Mm.
important. So you need to be a lifelong learner. And it's one of the critical skills for the 21st
Yes.
century, is to be a lifelong learner.
So I'm guessing that millennials and Gen Z actually know all of this. Would I be right in saying that anyone older than a millennial, they're the people that you're talking to at the moment?
The problem is schooling. Schooling has not caught up. Our education system is not caught up to where things are going. So, we're talking about fear of failure. Where
Yes.
do we get that from? We get it from the school system that says, here's what you have to learn. There's a right answer and a wrong answer. And
Yeah.
if you get the wrong answer, we're going to reprocess you, which is what happened when I repeated year 12. You go back and we'll reprocess you through the system until you get the right answers. And we get so scared of making the wrong answer because we're penalized for it.
Yes.
And that is not how life works. And it's not how the workforce is going. When you look at the jobs and the skills for jobs that they want in the future, it's creativity, it's nimble thinking, it's critical thinking. There's all these new skills, and it's not about being right or wrong. It's about being willing to take a chance on something.
I agree. I think when people go to take a chance, or they're trying to, they go to step up. But I think one of the things that often gets in the way is comparison. And I know as a woman, we seem to compare ourselves a lot. I've got a friend a really close friend, who is a prolific writer. She's got more than 40 books under her belt. She never reads her competitors' work. And because this has been a thing in my life, or I'm aware of it, I now live by a quote of Theodore Roosevelt, he said, "Comparison is the thief of joy." What do you think about that?
It's one of the key pillars of what I've learned, so that the extraordinary people are ordinary people who do extra. One of the others is that if you compare yourself against others, you will become bitter. If you compare yourself against yourself, you will become better. So it's about, do you want to be bitter or better? So comparison and comparing yourself against others, again, it's like kryptonite again. I'm guilty of it. It's a human thing, and we have to stop doing it. It's terrible.
It's terrible. It's terrible. It is the thief of joy. I think you have a better story that I've heard before, but I would love you to share that with your listeners, with our listeners.
Oh, okay. All right. So I was getting ready to go on a plane flight, and we all know there's good ways to fly. If you can go economy class. We all go that. What's better than that? Business class. What's better than business? First. What's better than first? Prime Minister's plane.
Nice.
I had to hop on the Prime Minister's plane, and it was with Alexander Downer when he was Foreign Minister of Australia, and we're going to Indonesia to film for 3 days with the President of Indonesia, Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono. And when you go on these flights, they reserve a couple of seats for the media at the back. And it's a bit of a lottery. You don't know if you're going until the night before, and you don't know who you're going with. So I ended up on the Prime Minister's plane and sitting down the back with Cynthia Banham. She was from the Sydney Morning Herald. Never met Cynthia, had small talk. How you doing, Cynthia? What do you do in your spare time? She said she loved to do running. Oh, wow. I love to run too. What sort of running do you do? She says, well, I'm getting into marathons. That's what I love doing, those long distance running. So but my problem was, at that stage, my knees were starting to give out and I couldn't run anymore. And you know what I thought in my head? I just thought, you're so lucky. That's why I didn't say it to her, but I was in this bit of a funk at that time, just comparing myself to other people. I was getting a bit long in the tooth in the job, and everyone seemed, younger and had more opportunity.
Yeah.
So anyway, we got to Indonesia. We did our filming, and I worked with another journalist over there named Morgan Mellish from the Sydney Morning Herald. Now, Morgan, when I stood next to him, he was about 6'3" high. He was about a pick handle wide across the shoulder, tapered down to a tiny waist. He was a surfer. He had these boyish good looks, this enthusiasm and charm. He was a foreign correspondent. And I just stood next to him and looked at him, and I felt like this old, sad sack of potatoes. I really did. And what do you think?
Yeah.
I said in my head, yeah, you're so lucky. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's what I thought. Anyway,
Mm.
we went on and we were coming back to the end of our couple of days, and we had to fly home. Now, just because you came over on the government jet doesn't mean you're going home.
Oh,
So it's a
okay.
bit of a lottery.
I see.
10 o'clock the night before, I get the phone call. I got on the government jet. And I was so smug. I thought, well, because that meant Cynthia and Morgan, you know what they had to do? They had to get up at 4 a.m., battle the Jakarta traffic, which is bad, get to Jakarta airport, battle the queues there, and then get on this Garuda flight and make the flight back. Me, nah. I didn't have to get up till about 6, had a leisurely breakfast, wandered downstairs, hopped into my police motorcade.
With a very smug look on your face, I'm imagining.
Very smug.
Yep.
Going through the Jakarta traffic like Moses parting the Red Sea with a police escort. Got to the government air wing, and about 8 o'clock was sipping my first iced tea. I was just sitting down there, had a little TV up in the corner, and these reports started to come through that a plane had overshot the runway at a place called Jakarta, which we were going to stop just for half an hour on the way home.
Yeah.
And as the reports came through, we realized it was a bad crash and a plane had overshot the runway and burst into flames and 22 people had died. And Morgan Mellish, who I stood next to, and coveted his boy's good looks and his whole future. Morgan was on that plane and he came back to Australia in a coffin. And Cynthia, who I sat next to on the plane on the way over. She came back to Australia about 5-6 weeks later, and she had burns to 65-70% of her body. And that running career that I had been so jealous of on the way over, well, that was over because she had both legs amputated.
Oh, God. Right.
And me, I get to be with you here now, Lynn, and tell this story to people. And for you to understand that comparing yourself is a pointless task.
It certainly is.
None of that got me anywhere. And that's when it started me thinking, hang on, I've got to reframe how I look at comparing myself. And that's when I started to look at, well, comparing myself against what I did yesterday and last week and last month and last year, that I can grow from. But comparing myself to other people all the time, this is where the bitter and the better came from.
I see.
And it's a little mantra. And I've lived by that. So when I had that YouTube channel that I talked to you about, one of the key reasons I think that was successful was when I decided to go on there, I made it a rule that I was not going to look at any other magic channel that was on YouTube at the time, because as soon as I did, I knew that I would compare what I was doing against them, and I would deviate from what I wanted to do in the message and the flavor and style that I wanted to do. So I didn't look at anything. And so I became basically insular for about 150 episodes of not looking at hardly any other magic on YouTube. And it was because of that, the comments started coming through. People go, you know what we like about you is you're completely different to anyone else out there. Everyone else was trying to do this really fancy, technical finger-flinging magic. And I just got on there as this daggy guy going, hey, listen, you can do this magic with stuff you can find around the home. And here's how you can present it. And people loved that. They loved that I was showing them little routines with that. Again, it was different, and that would have never happened if I'd compared myself against everyone else and thought, I better make sure that I'm keeping up with them.
I think I love this advice because I've suffered from it myself in the past. And I think it must be particularly hard as younger people to be exposed to so much social media and constantly comparing themselves with others. So I love that it is a terrible story, but that bitter, better story really demonstrates in a very sobering way how we should not be comparing ourselves to anybody else, just ourselves. Just compete against ourselves and make sure we get better and better. You visited a prisoner on death row who gave you a missing piece of the puzzle on change. What was it?
So, for starters, I've visited 2 prisoners on death row in 2 different countries. This is this is just one of them. So, this guy, his name was Jimmy Filiaggi, and Jimmy Filiaggi was known as the punk tough kid around town
Right.
in a place called Lorain County in Ohio in the USA. Uh, his nickname was Jimmy Diffused, like diffuse as in the short fuse,
Yep.
because if you got into a fight with Jimmy and you poked him in the chest, like, it was the worst thing that you could do. He just lashed out at you. He had a string of aggravated assaults behind him. Anyway, this anger problem that he had came to a head when he had a really bad argument with his wife. He put a gun to her head and pulled the trigger. So
Right.
Jimmy was convicted of murder. His was a famous case in the USA at the time. It was called the Twinkie defense. I won't go into it, but that's why we were there covering it. And I ended up going in to death row in Mansfield Prison in Ohio to spend time with Jimmy and interview him. Now, death row is like a prison within a prison within a prison. It's really hard to get in there. And so when you get in, they're very strict with the rules, and they say that you will have 1 hour with the prisoner. Once the prisoner, 1 hour at 60 minutes is up, the prisoner will then be removed. And it's a whole string of instructions.
Yeah.
And it was all delivered in his drawer. Do you understand these instructions as I have explained them to you?
Yeah.
Yes, clearly. And so Jimmy was brought in, and he's big guy. He's about 6'3", and we knew him from his family photos and all the court videos. And this was 10 years later. He'd been on death row for 10 years. Wow. He was a lot bigger. And it's funny what you remember. I remember hearing him before I saw him, because we were sitting in this room all set up with the camera ready to go. And I could hear the chains, like the rankle of chains as he was coming up the corridor, because he was shackled from ankles to waist, from waist to wrist. And he came in, we shook hands, and I've got to say, he's a very, very engaging guy. We did the interview with him, and as he was getting up to leave, I just thought, you don't often get to be with someone on death row that often. And I said to him, I just said, listen, Jimmy, look, your life is obviously so different to the life that I'm leading that you don't even know. But what can you tell me? Just tell me one thing. And he said, yeah, okay. And he said, come here. Now, Jimmy is this big guy. And so, he's on death row.
I'm a little closer.
there's connotations that come with that.
Yeah.
He said, come here. So I walked up close to Jimmy, and he said, lean forward. And what do you mean? He said, lean forward. And as you lean forward, your head goes down.
Yeah.
And then I heard like this snap of chains. And what it was him putting his hands out towards my head. Yeah. The chains are short and, they come taut.
Yeah.
And then he said, lean forward. And then he brought his 2 index fingers up with my head in between, and he tapped his index fingers on my temples as I was leaning forward.
Yeah.
And he said, 8 inches. 8 inches. He said, you're only ever 8 inches away from the best decision or the worst decision in your life. Change is a decision. And once you've made the decision to change, then change naturally. All the things, the steps that you need to take will just happen afterwards. And this has happened in all the major changes of my life. Mm-hmm. I remember when I left we were talking about, leaving the world of TV. Mm-hmm. I remember the moment I made the decision. I was sitting upstairs from where I am now, and I was sitting on the kitchen bench, and I was just processing it. And I just made the decision literally in my heart that I had to move from where I was comfortable behind the camera to metaphorically being in front of the camera. And I couldn't be in 2 places at once. I had to leave that to go to there. And once I had made that decision, you know what I did? I cried. It was like mourning. It was like something had just died. And if someone died, something close to you dies, it's terrible. It's mourning. And I cried and cried and cried.
And yet you still made the decision. So in your heart, it felt like that was the right move.
No, it didn't feel it was the right move. I had made the move, and it was the crying that indicated I had made that decision.
Yeah. Okay. So look, you teach the best video classes on using a smartphone to revolutionize your business. I want to talk about that in a sec. But if I don't have a business how can using a smartphone, video on my smartphone help me?
Oh, so if you don't have a business, I'll tell you what's coming in is video resumes. So even now, if you go to, say, Aldi, you go to Aldi, you don't go in person, you go online and you hit the button and there's a video application process that you go through. Society is going to video, and if you don't understand why, here's a very, very quick why. More people on the planet own a smartphone than own a toothbrush. We are addicted to smartphones.
Yeah.
We're also addicted to the convenience of smartphones. Just look around, we're all on them. And then when you're on a smartphone, have a look at the text. The text is really small, and look at your thumbs and your fingers, they're really big. And we all know that operating text on a phone is really difficult. Because we're addicted to these, we're now evolving a new way to communicate, a new language, if you like, and that language is video. We are going to a video communication society. So it's going to be prevalent in business, but out there, first place that you're going to use it is you're going to need it to be able to apply for jobs. Why? Because recruitment companies are using video because they don't have to look at it. Do you know who looks at the video? Artificial intelligence.
Yeah,
and
right.
They go through and they look at what you're saying, where your eyes are moving, a whole lot of things, and there are decisions on your future that AI is making. So your smartphone is a great way for you because it's got a camera and a selfie function that you can get in front of and just start to get comfortable being on video. It's not something you're born with. I spent most of my life hiding behind a camera, hiding behind a sniper scope, terrified of being in front of the lens. It's skills.
Yes, it is.
Learn these skills. I've now, made 1,000 videos online and I speak to large audiences. Terrified me once. So you can do it.
Okay, well, that's a great thing to end on. Let me ask you, the ancient Egyptians used to bury objects with their dead to help them in the afterlife. What object would you take?
Well, it's funny. I actually don't think I'd take the object. I think the object will be placed with me. I think now that my tombstone is going to be a large smartphone that's half buried or two-thirds buried into the dirt on a slight angle with just a big red video button on it. So.
Oh yeah, okay. I can see that really well. That's hilarious. Julian, where can listeners find out more information on either your courses or your speaking, your training? Where can they go?
Look, I'm a one-stop shop, and that's julianmather.com, JulianMather.com.
Okay, perfect. That was easy. And we didn't have a time to mention, but you have a book out with HarperCollins called The Second Best Job in the World, which I believe is a memoir of all your travels. ABC. Oh, you got one? Right there. Here's one I made earlier. Thank you very much.
There you go.
Available in all good bookstores.
Well, it's not. It's actually out of print now, unfortunately, but it's available online in Kindle. Yeah.
Okay, so you're getting in Kindle form. All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. All right. Now, I think, Julian, you've been so generous. Thank you for your gift of sharing your knowledge today and your wisdom and all your bits and pieces that seem to make so much sense, as well as your masterful storytelling. I guess I've learned a few things from you today. One, that it's critical, a reminder, it's critical to be able to learn and unlearn, to be a learner all your life. I love the thought of extraordinary people are just ordinary people who do extra. I think that is a great message. I like the 1825 rule, that it's basically going to take me 1825 days to change and to get good at something. And of course, that opportunity is everywhere and we should all be doing something about it. Have I missed something?
There's one thing, and it's my recommendation when people are going, I'm not sure, yes, I do want to change, I don't know what. This is the first step you do.
Yeah.
The first step you do is you trade half an hour of television that you watch at night, and you swap it in. You get up half an hour earlier and you slip on a set of headphones and you go and listen to a footpath. You go and listen to a podcast, but you do it while you're walking. So it's what I call Footpath University. I'm out there every morning and I go and I listen to something, and I've been doing it for years now. Yeah. And again, changing your thinking, changing the information that's coming into your head is the first step. So if you don't know, and if you go to my site at julianmather.com. You'll see Footpath University down the bottom. Click on that. I've got a list of about 12, if you don't know where to start, 12 good idea-changing podcasts. They're all really different. Have a listen, get an idea, and it might get you started on a new journey.
Thank you. Thank you, Julian. That is fantastic. And thank you for listening. Now, if you think people matter, you'll know that having teams who respect each other promotes a healthy culture. And in my program, Working with People You Just Don't Get is a great foundation for this. I've got a whole bunch of options. But first, every person jumps online and completes a behavioural profiling tool to find out what their preference is for apple, mango, lime or banana. And after that, you've got a range of options where we jump in to explore strengths and challenges of each particular type, how we communicate more effectively together and how we work more effectively together. Because when we do that, you have less stress, you have greater productivity, and you get more done. So you might choose a simple webinar. Perhaps you'd like a pre-recorded video that you listen to first and then come together for a live Zoom Q&A. Maybe post-COVID, you'd like to book me for a face-to-face workshop or even a conference gig. Or perhaps just take a look at the book, Bite Me and Other Do's and Don'ts of Dealing with Our Differences. So all this and more available on my website, lynscanella.com.au, where you can also do a taster of the quiz to get an idea of what fruit you are. Now, as this is brand new, I would love you to like and subscribe and maybe even write a review. That would be awesome. I am on LinkedIn, Facebook and Insta. So join me there so we can stay as connected as possible in this weird but wonderful world in which we live. Respect, connect and thrive. I'm Lynn Scanella and this has been People Matter.